Welcome to another installment in the Improve81 podcast series. My name is Jason Bond, and I'm the Communications Manager for the Virginia Department of Transportation Salem District. For this podcast, we will be discussing bridges along the Interstate 81 corridor. To share some information about this topic, I am joined by Dean Hackett, the Structure and Bridge Engineer for VDOT's Salem District, and Dave Covington, the I-81 Program Delivery Director. Welcome to you both. So Dave, can you give me some idea of how many bridges on 81 will be dealt with as part of the construction?
Yeah, Jason, just to give you a sense of how many bridges there are, we have 56 capital improvement projects in the program right now, and many of those include bridges in one way or another. So the larger projects can include as many as 8 bridges. So you multiply that by the number of projects we have, and you start to realize that we're dealing with dozens of bridges here, not just a few bridges here and there, but dozens of bridges that we'll have to take some sort of action on, whether it be widen and rehabilitate or even replacing that bridge.
So Dean, Interstate 81 is more than 50 years old. Don't all the bridges need to be replaced?
Well, Jason, bridge life can vary and structures can remain functional and safe for many decades. So the age of the structure really doesn't dictate when or if a bridge needs to be replaced. In accordance with federal law, we perform inspections of bridge structures on a regular basis, typically every 2 years. During these inspections, trained bridge inspectors do hand-on condition assessments of every critical component of the bridge, and then they document those conditions in writing and with photos. Based upon their findings, they assign a general condition rating to the primary components of the bridge. All of these inspections are recorded and tracked over time, and when the condition of a bridge falls to undesirable levels, we perform repairs or pursue replacing that structure when needed.
How do you inspect the parts of the bridges that are beneath the ground, Dave?
Jason, that's an excellent question, and it's an area where we apply both engineering and risk management principles. The primary way we determine the condition of those elements that are below ground is through visual observation. We inspect bridges regularly, as Dean just mentioned, to ensure that they are in overall good condition. We utilize periodic inspection reports as well as visual observations of the bridge during the design phase to determine the suitability of those underground components. If there has been movement of the bridge, there will be evidence such as cracks, gaps, or even visible settlement marks. This means that something below has moved and must be addressed. We also determine what material was used for the bridge foundations, generally steel piles or concrete footers. If steel piles were used, we perform analysis of the metal as well as the surrounding soil to determine if the steel piles could be compromised due to characteristics of the soils. Some soils will greatly accelerate the deterioration of bridge piles. If concrete foundation is present, we focus on any movement of the footers or the bridge elements. We also review the original design of the foundation to determine if it was designed to carry the loads that are on the interstate today. These reviews and analysis help us make a risk-based decision on whether the existing bridge elements can be reused or if the entire structure needs to be replaced. In addition to visual inspection, there are tools that we can use to create a virtual image of what the below-ground bridge elements look like. Technology such as ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, and electromagnetic radiation help us to create those visual images so that bridge engineers can make decisions on replacement versus rehabilitation and widening.
So, Dean, how does VDOT decide whether to replace a bridge, rehabilitate it, or widen it?
Well, Jason, as we've discussed several times here earlier, we inspect, record, and track the condition of every bridge in our inventory. We do this to identify structure needs or issues that might exist. From those records, structures with maintenance needs are identified and prioritized. Then we have to figure out what the most cost-effective course of action is to address the bridge's needs and then make a decision whether we are going to repair or replace that bridge. That decision is based primarily on the condition of the structure and the estimated cost to correct the deficiencies. If we're looking at a structure where additional capacity is needed and that bridge is in good condition, then widening that bridge may be an option. Remember, the bridges on I-81 are over 50 years old, so that has to be taken into consideration. The question is whether it's a good idea to add new elements onto an existing bridge that's that old. This is a conversation that we have, and we have to decide what makes the most sense.
So, Dave, how will inflation and the cost of materials affect all of this? Will VDOT have to make compromises, maybe rehabilitate instead of replace a bridge?
So inflation and the cost of materials impact our projects just like everybody else's projects. We have to pay market rates for materials, and there's no way around that. VDOT projects are carefully estimated from the beginning to ensure that they are adequately funded and inflation and risk contingencies are included in those estimates. VDOT also employs value engineering techniques to identify ways to reduce project costs or make up any cost differences. And remember, during the planning and design stages, repair versus replacement options have already been evaluated. So if repairing the bridge were an option, that's what we would be doing because it would be the most cost-effective alternative.
So, Dean, why is it so expensive to replace or rehabilitate a bridge, and why does it take so long?
Well, bridge work is a large-scale construction effort, so it's a massive undertaking to repair or replace one. While some of the components of a new bridge can be prefabricated, for the most part, bridges are still custom designed for and built on their specific location. It can require millions of dollars in labor, materials, and equipment to repair or replace a single bridge simply due to the size and scope of the effort. The design process alone requires hundreds of hours of work by professional engineers, surveyors, technicians, just to name a few. Construction of the bridge itself requires skilled laborers to perform the work in the field and operate heavy equipment such as backhoes, cranes, bulldozers, and such. Bridge structures then require huge quantities of expensive materials such as thousands of pounds of steel and hundreds of cubic yards of concrete. Because of all the steps required, building a bridge can take years to complete. When it's finished, dozens of people have been involved and hundreds of separate activities have been performed, but the final product will be well built and ready to serve for years to come.
So, Dave, will the new bridges have narrow shoulders like most of the bridges on I-81 do now?
No. The I-81 Corridor Improvement Program is focused on enhancing safety and operational characteristics of the interstate. Adequate shoulders enhance safety in a number of ways, including comfort to drivers, a refuge area in case of emergency, temporary storage area during snow removal, additional area to avoid collisions if another vehicle moves from their lane, and for use during emergency response. We will be providing wider shoulders on all new or reconstructed bridges. Generally, the right shoulder will be a minimum of 10 feet in width, and the left shoulder will generally be 6 feet in width. In addition to the safety features mentioned previously, wider shoulders help to keep water off of the bridges during heavy rain events, thereby enhancing safety.
How does VDOT protect sensitive waterways and wildlife habitat around these bridges, Dean?
Well, Jason, VDOT has environmental experts on staff who ensure that our bridge projects are constructed in accordance with requirements of various local, state, and federal environmental regulatory agencies. In all cases, our projects will have been reviewed and cleared by those agencies prior to being advertised for construction, and the necessary permits will have been issued to allow the work to be performed in accordance with all of their regulations. These permits define the measures that must be taken to protect the environment, such as time of year restrictions, in-stream work methods, and erosion controls. VDOT inspectors, as well as the contractors performing the work, are keenly aware of these permit requirements and adhere to them strictly.
So, Dave, are bridges over railroads any different?
Bridges over railroads are a little bit different than other bridges. First, the railroad generally owns the right-of-way for the area that passes over the railroad right-of-way beneath. This means that the railroad actually owns the right-of-way that our bridges are in. This means that we must coordinate extensively with the railroad to ensure that their needs are met as well as VDOT's. Second, railroad bridges generally need to be taller than roadway bridges. Railroad bridges need to be approximately 24 to 25 feet high over the railroad tracks, where bridges over roadways only need to be about 16.5 feet high. And last, bridges over railroads may need to provide additional width for future tracks to be added based on the needs of the railroad. This means that in many situations, we need to construct longer bridges than what exists today. Overall, there is a significant amount of coordination that must occur with the owners of the railroads to ensure that all users' needs are addressed.
So, Dean, if a bridge needs to be raised up to improve vehicle clearance, doesn't that cause issues with the roadway on both sides of it?
Well, it does, and there are a few ways to handle this. One solution is to raise the roadway on both sides of the new bridge to match the new height. Of course, this causes issues with drainage, utilities, and entrances on the overroutes that have to be addressed during design and construction. Besides raising the bridge up, sometimes it's possible to simply design a new bridge so that it allows the existing grades to remain intact. This reduces issues at the site, but it can complicate the design, and we evaluate the trade-offs of these and determine which is the best way to proceed.
So, Dave, if a bridge has to be raised, does that complicate how traffic will continue to operate during construction?
Yes, raising the elevation of a bridge generally requires much more design work to ensure that traffic can be maintained during construction. A minor increase in elevation does not often present a significant issue. However, there are numerous bridges that we need to raise substantially along the corridor. The reason is that we do have bridges on the interstate that do not provide adequate clearance for the roadways beneath. In order to provide the necessary clearance, we may have to raise a bridge several feet. This can mean very complex maintenance of traffic design. In some cases, raising a bridge above the current elevation can shape how we design the project. There are situations where we are able to construct an entirely new bridge within the median as opposed to trying to construct a new one in the location of the old bridge. Constructing bridges at a significantly higher elevation than the existing bridges can add substantial cost and time to a construction project due to the amount of temporary work that is needed to maintain traffic safely.
So, Dean, how will VDOT keep traffic moving around a bridge construction site?
Well, on all bridge projects, we work with other divisions within VDOT to determine potential impacts to traffic. Once these impacts are identified, the project design team will work with traffic engineers to develop a maintenance of traffic plan that will keep traffic moving through the project to the greatest extent possible. In all cases, every effort is made to minimize the impact of the project to the traveling public. On bridge projects on the I-81 corridor, our goal is to maintain 2 lanes of traffic through the construction site. However, lane widths or speed limits may be reduced. If there are construction activities that simply cannot be completed while keeping 2 lanes open, we will schedule that work outside of peak travel times to minimize the impacts to traffic.
I want to thank both Dave and Dean for joining me today for this podcast to talk about bridges on Interstate 81. For future podcasts, videos, and more information about the Interstate 81 Corridor Improvement Program in Virginia, visit Improve81.org. And as always, we wish you safe travels.